Bee Gees, falsetto harmonies, disco lights, and songs that defined entire generations. And when they think of Kenny Rogers, they hear that calm, gravelly voice, telling stories about gamblers, cowboys, and broken hearts. On the surface, these two legends seem to belong to completely different musical worlds, but behind the scenes, their paths crossed in ways that most fans never truly understood, and for decades, Barry Gibb stayed quiet about what really happened between them. Until now. For years, fans noticed subtle hints. A lyric here, a comment there, a look in Barry Gibb's eyes whenever Kenny Rogers' name came up in interviews. It always felt like there was more to the story, something unfinished, something emotional that Barry never fully explained, and that silence only made people more curious. Why would a man who wrote some of the most honest songs in music history hold back when it came to Kenny Rogers? To understand this, you have to go back to a time when both men were standing at very different points in their careers. Kenny Rogers was already a household name, a crossover superstar who had mastered the art of storytelling and song. He wasn't just singing melodies, he was narrating lives. Barry Gibb, on the other hand, was known as a musical genius, a songwriter who could shape emotions into melodies that stayed with you forever. When these two worlds collided, something powerful happened. But power doesn't always come without tension. Barry Gibb has now openly admitted that working with Kenny Rogers changed him in ways he never expected. He confessed that Kenny wasn't just another artist passing through the studio. Kenny was someone who challenged Barry's understanding of music, ego, and truth. Barry revealed that Kenny had a rare ability to walk into a room and instantly control the emotional temperature, not by demanding attention, but by quietly commanding respect. That, Barry admits, was intimidating. At the time, Barry was used to being the one with all the answers. He had written hit after hit, guided careers, and shaped sounds that dominated the charts. But Kenny Rogers didn't need guidance in the traditional sense. He knew exactly who he was and what he wanted to say. Barry has now confessed that this dynamic created an unspoken struggle, not a fight, not an argument, but a silent battle between two masters of their craft. Barry admitted that there were moments when he felt misunderstood by Kenny, and moments when he himself misunderstood Kenny. Kenny was deeply rooted in authenticity. If a lyric didn't feel real, he wouldn't sing it, no matter how beautiful it sounded. Barry, known for poetic emotion and dramatic flair, sometimes felt that Kenny was stripping away the magic. But what Barry didn't realize back then was that Kenny was forcing him to face something uncomfortable. Simplicity can be more powerful than perfection. In his confession, Barry shared that one of the hardest truths was realizing that Kenny Rogers didn't need him the way others did. That realization bruised Barry's ego more than he ever admitted publicly. He wasn't angry at Kenny, he was angry at himself for expecting validation. For a man who had spent his life giving music to the world, it was shocking to feel that his contribution wasn't the centerpiece. Over time, Barry began to see Kenny differently. He confessed that Kenny's calm confidence wasn't arrogance. It was survival. Kenny had lived enough life to know that music wasn't about impressing people. It was about telling the truth in a way that listeners could feel in their bones. Barry now admits that this lesson stayed with him long after their professional paths diverged, but the truth goes even deeper. Barry Gibb revealed that there was a moment, late one night, when he finally understood Kenny Rogers as a man, not a legend. They talked about loss, about the pressure of fame, about how lonely success can feel when everyone expects you to be strong all the time. Barry admitted that Kenny spoke about fame like a burden he learned to carry quietly. That conversation, Barry says, haunted him in the best possible way. For years after that, Barry avoided talking about Kenny publicly, not out of bitterness, but out of respect. He felt that putting their story into sound bites would cheapen what he learned from him. Barry confessed that he struggled with guilt after Kenny's passing, wishing he had told him how much those lessons meant. Fame had kept them busy, schedules kept them apart, and time did what it always does. It ran out. What shocked fans the most about Barry's confession was his admission that some of his later emotional songwriting was directly influenced by Kenny Rogers. Even if listeners never noticed, Barry said he started writing with more restraint, more honesty, and less fear of silence. He learned that sometimes the most powerful note is the one you don't sing. Barry also addressed a long-standing rumor that there was rivalry between them. He finally put it to rest. There was no rivalry, he said. There was admiration mixed with insecurity, respect mixed with unspoken lessons. Barry confessed that Kenny Rogers made him question himself, and that was both uncomfortable and necessary. As Barry Gibb grows older, reflection has become unavoidable. He admitted that when he looks back on his career, the moments that mattered most weren't the awards or chart positions. They were the quiet interactions with people like Kenny Rogers, who reminded him why music matters in the first place. Kenny wasn't chasing trends, he was chasing truth. And Barry now admits that truth is what he spent his entire life searching for. The confession wasn't dramatic. There were no tears on camera, no shocking accusations. Just a man finally honest enough to say that another man changed him. Barry Gibb confessed that Kenny Rogers taught him humility in a way no critic ever could. And that lesson, he says, was worth more than any hit song. Today, when Barry hears Kenny Rogers' voice, he doesn't just hear a singer, he hears a reminder that music is about connection, not control, about honesty, not perfection, and about leaving something real behind when the spotlight fades. And perhaps the most powerful part of Barry Gibb's confession is this. He said that if he could go back and change anything, he wouldn't change the misunderstandings, the tension, or the silence, because those moments forced him to grow. They forced him to listen, and they forced him to become a better artist and a better man. In the end, Barry Gibb didn't confess a scandal. He confessed a truth many artists never admit, that sometimes, the people who challenge us the most are the ones who shape us forever. And for Barry Gibb, that person was Kenny Rogers. And when Kenny Rogers comes to mind, it's a very different image. A calm voice, simple melodies, and stories that sound like they were pulled straight from real life. For a long time, fans believed these two legends existed in separate musical universes. But behind closed doors, their connection was deeper, more complicated, and far more emotional than anyone ever imagined. And for decades, Barry Gibb carried a truth about Kenny Rogers that he never fully shared. Until now, Barry has finally admitted that Kenny Rogers wasn't just another collaborator or fellow artist passing through his life. He was a mirror, one that reflected parts of Barry he didn't always like to look at. And that's exactly why the truth took so long to come out. In the early days of their interaction, Barry was at the peak of his creative confidence. He had already proven himself as a songwriter, producer, and performer. He knew how to shape a hit, how to layer emotions into harmonies, and how to command a room full of musicians. Kenny Rogers, on the other hand, walked in with something Barry couldn't manufacture or control: life experience. Kenny didn't rush it. He didn't compete. He didn't raise his voice to be heard. He simply waited, listened, and spoke when it mattered. Barry has now confessed that this quiet strength unsettled him. In an industry built on ego and applause, Kenny's calm presence felt almost rebellious. Barry admits that there were moments when he tried harder than usual to impress Kenny, only to realize that Kenny wasn't impressed by cleverness or complexity. Kenny cared about whether a song felt true, whether it sounded like something a real person would say when no one else was listening. That realization planted the first seed of discomfort. Barry says he began questioning his own instincts. He wondered if he had been hiding behind beauty and melody instead of honesty. Kenny would listen to a song and gently ask a question that cut straight to the core. Who is this song really about? Why does this line exist? What are you afraid to say out loud? Barry now admits that those questions followed him home at night. For years, fans speculated that there was tension between the two men. Barry finally explained that the tension wasn't personal, it was internal. Kenny Rogers forced Barry to confront something he hadn't fully faced before: that music doesn't need to be perfect to be powerful, it needs to be real. And real is scary, because real exposes you. Barry confessed that at one point he felt almost invisible in Kenny's presence. Not because Kenny ignored him, but because Kenny didn't react the way others did. There were no exaggerated compliments, no dramatic praise, just thoughtful silence. And for someone used to immediate feedback, that silence felt loud. Barry admits it bruised his pride more than he ever let on. But then came a turning point. One night, after hours in the studio, the conversation shifted away from music. Kenny spoke about loneliness, about how fame creates distance even when you're surrounded by people. He talked about the pressure of always being the strong one, and how exhausting it is to carry that image. Barry has now revealed that hearing Kenny speak so openly broke something open inside him. In that moment, Barry stopped seeing Kenny as a legend or a challenge. He saw him as a man who had learned to survive by staying grounded. Kenny wasn't emotionally distant. He was emotionally disciplined. He had learned that not every feeling needs to be performed. Some truths are meant to be carried quietly. Barry admitted that after that conversation, he never approached songwriting the same way again. Even when working with other artists, Kenny's voice echoed in his mind. Is this honest? Or is this just beautiful? Barry says he began leaving more space in his music, more pauses, more restraint, less fear of simplicity. What hurts Barry the most, according to his confession, is that he never fully expressed his gratitude to Kenny Rogers while he had the chance. Like so many things in life, time got in the way. Tours, projects, responsibilities. Barry believed there would always be another conversation, another chance to say thank you. But life doesn't make promises like that. When Kenny Rogers passed away, Barry says it felt like losing a teacher he never officially acknowledged. He carried regret, not because of something said, but because of something unsaid. For years, he avoided public discussions about Kenny, not because the memories were painful, but because they were sacred. Barry also addressed the rumors of rivalry one last time. He said there was no competition, no bitterness, no secret feud. What existed was something far more human: admiration mixed with insecurity, respect mixed with self. Kenny Rogers didn't try to outshine Barry Gibb. He simply stood firmly in his own truth. And that, Barry admits, is what made the biggest impact. As Barry reflects on his long career, he says the moments that matter most now are not the standing ovations or chart-topping records. They are the quiet lessons learned from people like Kenny Rogers. Lessons about humility, about listening, about knowing when not to sing, Barry confessed that Kenny taught him something no music school ever could, that the goal of music isn't to impress the world, it's to connect with it, to speak to someone who feels alone and let them know they're understood. Kenny Rogers mastered that art, and Barry now admits he spent years trying to understand how. Today, when Barry hears Kenny's songs, he hears more than nostalgia. He hears honesty, he hears restraint, he hears courage and simplicity, and he hears a man who knew exactly who he was, even when the world expected him to be something else. Perhaps the most powerful part of Barry Gibb's confession is his acceptance that the big discomfort Kenny caused him was necessary. Growth doesn't come from comfort, it comes from being challenged, from being humbled, from being forced to listen instead of perform. Barry says that if he could speak to Kenny Rogers one last time, he wouldn't talk about music at all. He would simply say thank you. Thank you for the silence. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for the honesty that didn't need applause. In the end, Barry Gibb didn't confess to a secret scandal or hidden feud. He confessed to something far more meaningful. That one man, without trying, reshaped the way he understood art, ego, and truth. And that sometimes, the quietest voices leave the deepest echoes. Disclaimer: the content in this video is based on publicly available information, media sources, and opinions. It is created for entertainment and educational purposes only. We do not claim or guarantee that every detail is 100% accurate.